This field, this game, is a part of our past, Ray. It reminds us of all that once was good, and it could be again.
The healing power of baseball, it is impressive. A new season is underway with all of its promise. But a special dream has already been realized on the field of Cornersville Middle School in Tennessee. 14-year-old catcher Luke Terry hasn't let the loss of an arm keep him from playing baseball. Not only baseball, but playing catcher. Look at how easily he catches the ball, flips his glove into the air, grabs the ball, and then tosses it back to the pitcher. Luke's arm was amputated when he was just 19 months old due to an E. coli infection. And talk about a fighter. His mom says Luke flatlined on the operating table 3 times at 19 months old. No wonder he's overcome the odds on the field, becoming one of the team's top players. He certainly has the biggest heart. Luke's story as a one-armed star has gone viral, but the real story, like I said, is his heart. We thank you so much for joining us. I've had a lot of fun doing this. In fact, they've invited me back tomorrow, and I'm honored to do that. I'd love to hear what your thoughts are about tonight's show. Be sure to tweet me at Jason in the House. That's at Jason in the House. Shannon Bream, one of my favorite people on the planet, and the Fox News team at night are up next. Shannon, it's all yours.
I'm going to skip the tweet and just tell you right now, I love the show. How about that? And we'll see you tomorrow night at 10 p.m. Eastern. Thanks, Jason.
Thank you.
All right, I'm Shannon Bream. This is Fox News at Night, and here is what's new tonight. The caravan President Trump has been tweeting critically about is taking a break in a field in Oaxaca, Mexico. The group of about 1,100, mostly Honduran migrants, is waiting for new information about where to go next. A group of about 200, we're told, broke off yesterday and hopped a freight train, probably bound for the U.S. A Mexican government official says the caravans are tolerated because migrants have a right under Mexican law to travel to the U.S. border to seek asylum in the United States. Meanwhile, tonight, the Trump administration is taking steps to speed up deportations as immigration activists celebrate the release of Fernando Carrillo, who was taken into custody last fall after re-entering the country illegally after having been previously removed. Carrillo has a drunk driving offense and previous deportations on his record. Today, he walked out of an immigration office in San Francisco. His attorney argued he would be persecuted if sent back to Mexico. We've got team coverage tonight. Trace Gallagher covering the showdown over the Mexican caravan. We begin, though, with Chief National Correspondent Ed Henry on the White House's new pressure campaign on illegal immigration. Ed?
Shannon, great to see you. Breaking tonight, an official at the Justice Department has just confirmed to Fox that the Trump administration is now imposing quotas on federal immigration judges to speed up deportations of illegal immigrants. The union representing these judges had prohibited these metrics from being put into place, but a Justice Department official tells us, quote, these performance metrics, which were agreed to by the immigration judge union that is now condemning them, are designed to increase productivity and efficiency in the system without compromising due process. This comes as that caravan of about 1,100 people you mentioned fleeing Central America is traveling through Mexico, some trying to get to America, which has drawn the ire of President Trump repeatedly over the last 48 hours. Various tweets, statements to the press. In fact, during the annual Easter egg roll today at the White House, he said a deal on DACA is dead, as the Mexican ambassador to the U.S. tried to push back on a separate threat from the president to end NAFTA altogether unless Mexico finally secures the southern border.
The Democrats have really let them down. They've really let them down. They had this great opportunity. The Democrats have really let them down. It's a shame. And now people are taking advantage of DACA, and that's a shame. It should have never happened.
It is in our own best interest, and that's the way we see it, to assure that migration is safe, legally, and ordered. NAFTA, in our view, has been largely a successful agreement for the three countries. It is 25 years old. It needs updating and modernizing, and that's why we're focusing with the U.S. and our Canadian friends in finding a solution that is win-win-win for the three countries.
Now, tonight, the nonpartisan PolitiFact is noting it's misleading for the president to conflate the caravan with DACA as he did this weekend, because only people who have lived in the U.S. since June of 2007 were eligible for DACA, though we have seen illegal immigrants find ways to get all kinds of other benefits in California and other states, which is why tonight the president tweeted, quote, as ridiculous as it sounds, the laws of our country do not easily allow us to send those crossing our southern border back where they came from. A whole big wasted procedure must take place. Mexico and Canada Canada have tough immigration laws, whereas ours are an Obama joke. Act Congress, he says. Well, Democrat Dianne Feinstein did not take kindly to the president repeatedly blaming Democrats for a stalemate on DACA. The president now saying a deal is even dead. Feinstein insisting she could support funding for the wall, but the president walked away. Feinstein tweeting, President Trump is absolutely wrong on DACA. He unilaterally rescinded DACA for no reason and has rejected every single bipartisan proposal that would protect dreamers from deportation. It's simply false to say Democrats walked away from the table. Bottom line is, President is trying to fire up his political base. This is an issue that he won on in 2016, illegal immigration. He's trying to fire up conservatives ahead of the midterm, Shannon.
We'll see if it works.
All right.
All right, Ed, thank you so much. All right, our Homeland Security Secretary discussing the migrant caravan with Mexican officials tonight. Trace Gallagher joins us live with that part of the story. Good evening, Trace.
Good evening, Shannon. While the caravan of some 1,100 Central American immigrants continue making their way to the U.S.-Mexico border, President Trump is now doubling down on pressuring Mexico, issuing a flurry of tweets both on Easter and today, with his latest statement saying, quote, Mexico has the absolute power not to let these large caravans of people enter their country. They must stop them at their northern border, which they can do because their border laws work, not allow them to pass through into our country, which has no effective border laws. And amid the tweets, there's now word that Homeland Security Secretary Kirstjen Nielsen is working with Mexico's Interior Minister on how best to stop the flow, with Secretary Nielsen tweeting, quote, I agree with POTUS' demand for Congress to address outdated and dangerous immigration loopholes. The system is broken. The traffickers, transnational criminal organizations like MS-13 know how to exploit our laws. We need to get smarter, tougher. We are exploring all options to protect the homeland. And yet, here they come, albeit very slowly, on cargo trains. 1,100 people are mostly from Honduras and say they are seeking political asylum in the U.S. because of violence in their country. The caravan is organized by a Southern California migrants' rights group called People Without Borders, and so far it appears they have plenty of food, water, and assistance. We're told they should arrive at ports of entry in either California, Arizona, or Texas sometime in the next 2 weeks. If they claim asylum, they'll be detained for at least a few weeks, possibly up to a year. But Texas Governor Greg Abbott just tweeted that he will have National Guard troops stationed along the border. And if they cross into Southern California in a few weeks, they may find a different political climate. On April 17th, San Diego County will talk about opting out of California's sanctuary laws. Today, a county supervisor issued this plea. Watch.
Public safety is a #1 priority of government. That's the reason governments were founded in the first place, keep people safe. And that's the #1 priority in San Diego County. So I'm hopeful that my board in San Diego County will join Orange County in their fight against this really bad law in California.
Orange County and the city of Los Alamitos joined the Trump administration lawsuit against California last week. The city of Escondido, near San Diego, will vote to do the same this week. Shannon.
All right, Trace Gallagher on the West Coast for us. Thank you so much, Trace. Here with more now on the caravan and the Trump administration's response. Arash Aramesh is a San Francisco attorney. Harmeet Dillon, an RNC committee woman for California. Great to see you both tonight.
Happy to be here, Shannon.
Good to be with you.
All right, I want to start by playing something from your senior senator there, Dianne Feinstein, when she was asked about this issue, this underlying issue of DACA. So let's start there.
The point is DACA is here, and we've got 800,000 young people.
Well, your answer indicates, though, that it's on shaky legal ground.
It is. That's why we need to pass a law, and we should do it.
All right, Senator Feinstein says it's on shaky legal ground. There have been many, many disputes and conversations and fights about whether or not President Obama even had the authority to do this. Harmeet, what say you?
Yes, I agree with Senator Feinstein that it's on shaky legal ground. And the point there is that President Obama issued an executive order after he repeatedly failed to get this relief from Congress. And so that's why it's on shaky ground. And that's the exact reason that the president revoked it and then offered a deadline 6 months later for Congress to come to him with the deal. And in the interim, the president offered a very generous offer, not just DACA relief for the 800,000, but also DACA relief for another 1 million people, plus a 10 to 12-year path to citizenship in exchange for $25 billion of funding for the wall. It's the Democrats who walked away from the table. It's Congress that refused to compromise and reach a deal. So that's why we have this problem. And it's a shame for those young people who came here without doing anything wrong themselves, that Democrats want them as a campaign issue and a campaign football rather than solving the problem for them.
I mean, Ari, is that a fair way to describe this going into the fall? Because there were numerous proposals that none of them in the Senate could get to 60 votes with Republicans or Democrats. I mean, nobody got it done.
It is true that DACA has been on shaky grounds. That's why President Obama, being a statesman, he came out with an executive order and decided to make sure that those children who grew up here are Americans culturally, linguistically, you name it. Some of whom have served in the military, some of whom go to some of the best colleges in this country. Their crime rate is some of the lowest compared to any other ethnic socioeconomic group in this country. That they would stay here and they would be treated as Americans in their own home country, and they don't know any other country but here. Now,
but
President Trump, allow me. No. If you're not going to interrupt her, you're not going to interrupt me.
Well,
so
no,
let me
you
just
need to
finish
answer
the point.
The question that I asked you.
Well, I'm answering the question,
who is to
and
blame
that's
for this?
Absolutely, it's President Trump. You have a Republican House and a Republican Senate, and you have the president, and he's complaining and nagging every day. That's Democrats' fault. At some point, Republicans got to realize they're really bad at governing, and they can't even get things done amongst themselves. Once they realize that, then they will realize that one thing, it's bad to politicize the lives of millions of DACA eligible sort of DACA people in this country just to make a political point to some of the worst fringes of Trump's base.
So, Harmeet, what do you do with that argument, the fact that Republicans have the White House and control both houses? Now, they don't have 60 in the Senate, and there's still a legislative filibuster there, but this didn't get done.
Yeah, I would agree with the fact that some finger pointing and some blame is appropriate for the Republicans in Congress. They've let us down. But as you pointed out, they don't have 60 in the Senate, and that's really been one of the roadblocks. And Democrats have repeatedly played loosey with the football with the president. They've said they would sign a deal where they gave him funding and they got relief for DACA, and then they refused. So that is really where the blame lies. And that deal can still be had. That deal can still be had. Except for now, both parties, legislators, are running for office, and their midterms are coming up. And so this is one of the hottest issues in politics. And I'm afraid that political will isn't there to do a deal right now, which is a real shame for these kids. They did have the opportunity last year.
Yeah, and quickly, Ari, what do you say to that? Because it's April, and the average American out there hears that Congress isn't going to get anything substantive done the rest of this year, and the rest of us have to show up for work.
Right. Now, and Shannon, those are good points. And it's April. It's too late. You know, it's almost tax season. Tax season is almost over. But it's not true that the Democrats offered the money and walked away. It's not true. The Democrats actually were willing, despite the fact that we're taking a lot of heat from their own base, to actually go along with a bad idea, which is the wall. But they were willing to compromise. And it's the president who one day decides something, and the next day, it depends on who, to whom he's listening. Most likely Steve Miller here. He changes his mind. It's been bad. Unfortunately, I got to say this president has been sort of wobbling on this idea and this issue, and not trying to link DACA to this caravan of immigrants coming from Honduras. It's just shameless, and the president lies shamelessly, and that's bad. That's bad policy-wise, and it's eventually going to haunt him politically.
Well, he has talked a lot about being soft on the DACA kids and wanting to find a solution, which has given him fire from the right as well. There weren't enough Democrats or Republicans or a combination of them to get anything done, so this continues. Ari and Harmeet, thank you both very much.
Our pleasure. Thank you.
All right, President Trump meeting with his new top economic advisor tonight, Larry Kudlow, and the president discussing the White House economic agenda. Kudlow's been skeptical of tariffs in general, but says he's fine with measures that target China. Kudlow and the president were joined by outgoing economic advisor Gary Cohn, White House Chief of Staff John Kelly, and several other White House and economic aides. Well, April not getting off to a rosy start on Wall Street. Besides the unwelcome early April snow, worries about trade and a tech sell-off hitting stocks hard. Here's Ashley Webster of the Fox Business Network at the New York Stock Exchange. Ashley.
What a way to begin a new month and a new quarter on Wall Street. We had a full-blooded sell-off. The Dow off 758 points at one point. It did recover some 300 points close to the close, but nevertheless, a lot of red ink on the markets today. The S&P down more than 2%, and it was the Nasdaq also down well over 2%, wiping out all of its gains for the year. And it's those tech stocks that make up the Nasdaq market, and it's those tech stocks again that took a battering there is a concern that the more regulation, government oversight, and the protection of consumer data all could lead to a model that would hurt the growth of these companies, that the bottom line would be hurt. Even civil liberties groups are now coming in saying that these companies, Facebook in particular, needs to do a better job of protecting users' data. So bottom line is, since the Facebook scandal hit some 2 weeks ago, the Financial Times estimates that more than $250 billion has been wiped off the market value of these tech stocks. Now, lurking in the background today was the fear of an escalating trade war with China, although I have to say that is really just bubbling away on the back burner. The biggest story has been this big sell-off in the tech sector, and whether that will continue and whether indeed the government is going to step in. So that said, what happens on the second trading day of this month, we'll find out tomorrow, but no doubt there's more fear in the air down here, Shannon, than there is opportunity. Back to you.
All right, Ashley Webster for us. Thank you tonight. Republicans look to flip a seat in deep blue country as a Democratic lawmaker faces intense scrutiny. Can the GOP capitalize on a Me Too controversy? And are they coming for your guns? It's called the red flag law. Police armed with warrants seizing guns from their legal owners. A lot of folks think it's a good idea, though. That story when we return. There may be a bright spot for the GOP due to a scandal in deep blue areas. And as surprise announcement tonight, Kristen Fisher's back. We are very happy to see her. Good evening, Kristen.
Thanks, Shannon. Great to be back. So this surprise announcement is that Congresswoman Elizabeth Esty will not be seeking re-election. The Connecticut Democrat made the announcement amid mounting calls for her to resign after how she handled that sexual harassment case involving her former chief of staff. Well, tonight, Esty said in a statement, quote, "I have determined that it is in the best interest of my constituents and my family to end my time in Congress at the end of this year and not seek re-election. In the terrible situation in my office, I could have and should have done better. To the survivor, I want to express my strongest apology for letting you down." Now, Esty first came under fire last week after reports emerged that it took her 3 months to fire her chief of staff after learning he'd been accused of punching and even threatening to kill a female staffer in her office, Anna Cain. Today, House Minority Leader Nancy Pelosi said Ms. Cain is to be commended for her courage in coming forward and telling her story. As Congresswoman Esty has acknowledged, her actions did not protect Ms. Cain and should have. So with Esty out of the race for her seat in Congress is now suddenly wide open. And even though a Connecticut Republican hasn't won a seat in Congress in more than a decade, the party's congressional committee believes that this may be their chance to change that. The committee's communications director said tonight that, quote, Elizabeth Esty's cover-up over her staffer's domestic violence scandal was as reprehensible as it was morally bankrupt. The NRCC is ready to win this competitive seat this fall. Democrats won't be able to distance themselves from the stain Esty left on their brand. Now, keep in mind, Connecticut is still overwhelmingly a deep blue state. It would be a major upset for any Republican to win. But this is a district that does tend to skew more to the right than the rest of the state. In 2016, Hillary Clinton won it by just 4 points. So it is at least within the realm of possibility that Republicans could flip this seat this November, Shannon.
All right, Kristen Fisher. Good to see you again. Thanks.
Good to see you. Thanks.
All right, do Republicans have any real shot at picking up the seat? Let's ask our panel tonight. Scott Bolden, Democratic strategist and former D.C. Democrat Party chair. Derek Hunter, contributing editor to the Daily Caller. And Bree Payton, staff writer for The Federalist. Welcome to all of you.
Thank you.
Scott, I'll start with you. Does the GOP have any real chance here?
As long as Donald Trump is in the president in the White House, the Republicans don't have a chance in regard to the 2018 elections. And while this congressional 5 district may be leaning to the Republicans and have conservatives, 45% are independents and Republican moderates. That gives them a chance. But every day Donald Trump tweets, every day he passes a policy where 65% of this country disagrees with it. The key for Democrats is finding a great candidate, a conservative Democrat with a great public service resume, and one that can build coalitions with the independents and moderate Republicans, and I think it'll stay Democratic.
Derek, does Esty do them a favor, the Democrats, by stepping away? So now whoever does run is not running with having to talk about the scandal all the time.
They're still going to have to talk about the scandal. What Congresswoman Esty did in her statement right after the reading there stopped, she wrote, in Congress and in workplaces across the country, we need to make stronger workplace protections. She takes blame. And then says, but it's everybody's fault. And that's the attitude. We saw it with Harvey Weinstein. Oh, it's horrible. Society has really done a disservice to women here. It's like, no, you did. Congresswoman, you did it. So if Republicans can find a way to message on that and say, it's not our fault, we didn't do this, you did this, they can win. With Scott talking about this, I had to check the year. Is it 2016? Because you just replace the name Donald Trump, make him the candidate, and there's no way Donald Trump can win.
Oh, he's the candidate. In every race, he's going to be the candidate.
And he's at 50% approval rating, and he won the presidency.
He will not be in Connecticut.
Well, he shouldn't waste the gas.
Let's bring Bree in here. Bree, I mean, what do you think? He's been underestimated before, but listen, presidents historically do not do well in the first midterm after their election to the White House.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, honestly, both parties are scrambling, and we can see that by the fact that there's been a lot of names floated. None of them have been really solid or really pushed by any one sort of party. Both parties are scrambling in this issue. Yes, that congressional district that we are talking about is the most Democratic district in the whole state of Connecticut, or I'm sorry, Republican in the state of Connecticut. But there's more independent voters than voters that are affiliated with any party. So either party is going to have to work really hard in order to get people's votes in that district. And I think, that you're right when you bring up the point that just the fact that a Democratic woman took 3 months to fire someone with offenses so egregious is going to spur a lot of conversations about the Democratic Party. Are they really the party that's for women? Are they really the party that, is keeping their fingers clean, as we were talking about this Me Too movement? What do they really stand for? Who are they? There's going to be a lot of questions that are set forth.
And now they're going to have to spend money on a seat in a race that they otherwise wouldn't have had to.
Yeah, I do want to get to topic 2 because I want to get you all quickly to weigh in on this. This is the Sinclair stations where the anchors all read statements across different cities and people freaked out, including, Dan Rather, who said this: news anchors looking into camera and reading a script handed down by a corporate overlord. Words meant to obscure the truth, not elucidate it, isn't journalism. It's propaganda. It's Orwellian, a slippery slope to how despots wrest power, silence dissent, and oppress the masses. I don't know if you guys have read it, but I read the script of I didn't watch the whole video, but I read the script of what they said. There's no mention of conservatives or of Trump. They say the truth is not left or right. Are people inferring too much, Derek?
They pledged to do honest journalism, and that scares the heck out of people like Dan Rather, he's and CNN. So it's funny because if you do read the statement, if you do listen to the entire thing, it really is, we are going to be straight, honest journalists, and God forbid that exist in 2018.
And they do also include, Scott, a statement that says, if you don't think we're being fair, here's how you call and report it to us. So.
Well, God bless them, but the reality is it doesn't matter what the rhetoric is that they promote. And by the way, they're trying to get their acquisition of these other conservative stations approved by the FCC and DOJ. And his code words in this document include fake news. But you put that aside, the reality is that I don't think people are as upset about the statement because it is kind of content neutral. But the reality is when you juxtapose that and compare that to Sinclair and the conservative rhetoric and the rantings and ravings on all
and the X-Files all of a sudden.
I got to tell you, it's completely inconsistent with the content neutral statement. That's why it's a problem.
Why does CNN get to do these kind of ads? Why does CNN get to go out there and say, oh, an apple's an apple is an apple, and is winking at things, and we all know what they're inferring, and that's perfectly fine and wonderful.
An apple.
Tell me what Sinclair's statement is like.
I watch CNN a lot, and I work with CNN a lot.
You don't want to start that discussion because I have a feeling Bree's got a lot to say about that. Okay, panel, please stick around. We've got some more hot topics for you, so we'd love for you to come back. Don't go anywhere. In the meantime, Oklahoma teachers get a raise and then go on strike. So what are the demands now, and how do they get resolved? Oklahoma's Lieutenant Governor Todd Lamb has got a very interesting position. He joins us with both sides of the story. Public school teachers in Kentucky and Oklahoma skipping class, choosing instead to march on their respective state capitals, hoping to get more money. Mike Tobin has details.
Public schools in Kentucky were closed Monday as thousands of teachers descended on the state capitol in Frankfort. Their anger motivated by a pension reform bill for which Republican Governor Matt Bevin told teachers they should be grateful. But it was tacked onto a sewage bill and, according to teachers, passed deceptively without input.
People are angry about the backhandedness, backdoor deals, the corruption in Frankfurt.
On Monday, teachers said they wanted to pressure lawmakers to be certain the state budget served the best interest of public schools.
You know, our students are the future, and they need to fund our future.
That's what we're here for!
In Oklahoma, teachers demonstrated despite already receiving an agreement for a $6,100 pay raise. They had asked for $10,000. They claim the Sooner State ranks 49th for teacher pay and school funding.
Some folks say, you got that pay raise. What more do you want? Well, I'm going to tell you what more we want. We want a good school that every student deserves. That's what we want.
Teachers there have emphasized their demonstration is less about their pay, more about upgrading outdated teaching tools.
This is from 2006, and still to this day, I'm learning from it.
Both demonstrations inspired by West Virginia teachers who last month walked out for 9 days and received a 5% pay increase. A lot of schools are on spring break, but teachers are supposed to return to their normal schedules on Tuesday. However, union representatives say they will continue to walk off the job if lawmakers don't start negotiating. And the Arizona Education Association says teachers in the Grand Canyon state are planning demonstrations, but not necessarily walking off the job. Shannon, back to you.
Mike Tobin, thank you very much. A lot of finger pointing in Oklahoma over funding for teacher pay and upgrades to public schools. So let's talk about it with the state's Republican Lieutenant Governor, Todd Lamb. Welcome, sir.
Shannon, thank you. It's great to be on your program.
You've got an interesting perspective here because you also happen to be married to a teacher at one of these schools. So what's the discussion like in your house?
Well, I'm married to, I think, the best teacher in the state of Oklahoma, my wife. I've leaned on my wife, Monica, for a lot of advice and counsel in education issues throughout my career. We have a high school student, we have a middle school student, and my wife teaches elementary, so you kind of run the gamut there in what I'm personally involved in and the lens I look through, not just as lieutenant governor, not just as a candidate for Governor Shannon, but also as a dad. I look at a lot of these policies through the lens of a father that cares a lot about public education in Oklahoma.
All right, I want to read something, a couple of excerpts that come from the Washington Post. They're on the ground doing some reporting about what they saw and what the teachers are telling them, some of the teachers. They describe this situation in the schools: computers and textbooks that are more than 10 years old, leaking roofs, that kids are shivering through the winter because there are faulty heaters, and buildings are not properly maintained. Some school districts where they've gone to 4 days a week because they can't afford to have electricity for 5 days a week classes. And then they have this quote: Oklahoma has faced some of the deepest cuts to education in the nation. Adjusted for inflation, state spending per student has fallen nearly 30% over the past decade, according to the left-leaning Center on Budget and Policy Priorities. What do you say to that?
Well, there's a lot to say to that, Shannon. And let me state the most recent proposal that's been passed by the legislature in Oklahoma. It provides money for a teacher pay raise, but really the package gets an F in reform. And the reform, you hit on some of the key elements that Oklahoma needs to reform in education. Now, historically in Oklahoma, in 1990, Oklahoma passed House Bill 1017, which was kind of sold to the citizens and to educators as the panacea, the end-all, be-all, fix-all to common education in Oklahoma. Well, that didn't work, so around early 2000, 2002, around there, Oklahoma passed the education lottery, additional funding for education. But you were quoting somebody that talked about the classroom, textbooks, deteriorating walls. Here's the reform that Oklahoma needs. Not just funding for education. Yes, I support that. I support a teacher pay raise, but reform with it. And as I plan to be the next governor of Oklahoma, reform that I'm for and support and will require is a minimum of 65% of all the education dollars to go inside the classroom. Shannon, that's where the two most important people are, our students and our teachers. Not enough money is going in the classroom. 65% requirement inside the classroom helps with teacher pay, new textbooks, new technologies, better infrastructure inside the classroom. That's where money needs to be spent and prioritized.
All right, here's what one of your state reps, who is a Democrat, had to say. She says, it's absolutely frustrating because we've seen package after package be put up for a vote that has disproportionately affected middle class, working Oklahomans, and hasn't asked the oil and gas industry or those who are making more to pay their fair share. So where do those extra dollars come from?
Well, let me just say that I'm a proven conservative. I've been anti-tax. I just spent 6 years in the Oklahoma State Senate years ago. My time as lieutenant governor, I don't have a large policy role, but I've been anti-tax increases. I didn't support tax increases for this teacher pay raise because there are other ways to get there, Shannon. I talked about 65% in the classroom, but Oklahoma needs to reform our budget process. It's antiquated, out of date. Right now, the budget's decided by about 5 legislators in a smoke-filled room with the door closed with 2 months to go, or excuse me, 2 weeks to go in our legislative session, and the door opens up and the rest of the legislature is forced to vote on the budget. So we need serious budget reforms in Oklahoma. Last year, billions of dollars was allowed out the door in special giveaways. We can find $400 million, $500 million, $600 million for teacher pay or other issues we need to address in Oklahoma in the billions and billions of dollars Oklahoma allows out the door. What I don't want, or what I do want, let me say, I want to make sure our kids in Oklahoma receive the best education possible. I want to reward our hardworking teachers. Teachers, they have a very tough and challenging job. I know because I would go with my wife to her classroom. I went with her about a month ago on a Sunday evening. Parking lot was filled. I thought we were missing a school activity. My wife said, no, these are my colleagues getting ready for the week. Yep. So I support getting a great education for our students. We got to reform how that money gets there. And what I don't want with these tax hikes, these tax increases, I don't want a young boy or young girl to go home from school and hear their parent lost a job because of tax increases.
Yeah. It's a very difficult puzzle to put together. As the daughter of a teacher, I know absolutely how hard they work and how much out of their pockets they often spend as well. Lieutenant Governor, thanks for stopping in with us.
Thank you, Shannon.
All right, for months, scores of President Trump's nominees for posts from ambassadorships to deputies at cabinet-level agencies have been stalled, including Rick Grinnell. You'll remember his story, popular across both sides of the aisle, but he's been held back from his appointed post. Tonight, it sounds like President Trump does not want to take it anymore. Get ready for a lively debate when our panel returns. Police in Seattle are going after guns, particularly residents who are deemed to be a risk to themselves or others. Dan Springer takes a look at the initiative that's surprising some for the lack of controversy it's creating, at least in the Emerald City.
Shannon, Seattle police gave us an up-close look at how these red flag or extreme risk laws are working. And what's remarkable is the lack of conflict and controversy as they seize guns from people who are a danger to themselves or others. Plenty of due process was built into the law. Immediate family members and police can petition for an ERPO, or Extreme Risk Protection Order. A judge weighs the evidence and usually signs the petition. Then police serve it and ask the subject to surrender his or her guns. Sometimes they don't. Often they do hand them over. If they refuse, police get a search warrant and get the guns that way. In 9 months, they've confiscated 27 guns from 13 people. Police are careful to not be heavy-handed, and so far they have not had a big confrontation.
We've had 3 individuals that have specifically thanked us after the execution of the ERPO order because, to their admission, they agreed that it was probably not a good idea that they had firearms in play.
31-year-old Alexander McKenzie, who according to court documents is a veteran being treated for PTSD, had been acting strange and staring down customers at a pizza restaurant while carrying a handgun. The police were called and they petitioned for the order. A few days later, they had the gun, and McKenzie told us he was grateful. Only 6 states have these red flag laws, but in the wake of the mass tragedies in Parkland, Florida, and the church in Texas, many more are considering them. So far in Washington state, there has not been a complaint that gun rights have been violated.
We've seen the downside to people who are distraught or crazy, taking out their problems on the general public. We don't want that to happen.
These laws are a major priority for the Brady campaign. They say at least 30 states are considering passing their own. Shannon?
Dan Springer for us from Seattle. Thank you so much. All right, more states are considering passing their own laws just like that one. So let's bring in tonight's panel to talk about it again. Scott, Derek, and Bree are back. And Bree, I'll start with you. It's interesting because I hear from a lot of folks who are on the gun rights side who say with the proper due process rights, they don't have a problem with this.
Yeah, you know, I honestly have kind of conflicting feelings about this because, you know, time and time again, you can see an instance where if there had been procedures in place that people would have followed, it could have potentially prevented a mass shooting. But on the other hand, you know, I guess what does constitute an ability to take this away, right? I mean, if in this case, it does seem a little bit better. No one's complained about it and things like that. But In other cases, I mean, could my parent who's upset at me or another family member call and have my gun taken away for a personal matter? That's not, always clear. And that's something that we do have to wrestle with and we do have to look at. So I think it'll be interesting to see how reactions continue to play out in Seattle and in other states that are enacting these kind of laws.
Yeah, Derek, I talked to Lindsey Graham and some others on the Hill who are trying to work on something at the national level that would work this way to kind of codify this. But the thing is, in his case, what he was talking about, they could actually take the gun before the person who's fighting it has a chance to go to the judge and make his argument.
Right, and that's
so that, for a lot of people, that step is problematic.
That's putting the cart before the horse. As we heard in the case there, the courts rarely turn this down. And I don't want it to become like a FISA situation. I agree with Bree that this is an important tool for law enforcement, and there certainly are people, I think we could all agree, like, we've got to keep an eye on this person. But if it does become weaponized, if it does become there's a bitter divorce or a family feud at Christmas and somebody decides I'm going to show them what for, you don't want it to be an automatic tap-in putt in the courts. There have to be due process protections. It's early in this, and it's spreading now. I certainly don't want it to be on a national level, because if the government does anything, it screws things up. But on a state-by-state level, where the government is more reactive directly to the people and responsive to the people, I'm a little more comfortable with this. But again, I need to see more data.
I hear discomfort from my colleagues here who are Republicans or Republican-like. How do you disagree with these 6 states that say if you are mentally ill, mentally challenged, or have issues, and people report you, and you have to give them due process?
I think there's something off about you. I want to report you.
Yeah, absolutely.
Are you okay with that? You lose your gun rights for a year.
I'm okay with that
because I said something.
I get due process.
As long as that part is built into it.
Well, the law has to require it. I'm a former prosecutor from New York City. I can tell you these laws work. And in all the states, in one form or another, you have these laws in place already. This kind of streamlines it. But the bottom line is, whether it's Parkland, whether it's South Carolina, whether it's Texas, the risk of someone mentally ill committing a mass murder.
I don't want to have my rights diminished because somebody else abused theirs.
I think
I'm sorry, that's
slippery ground.
Anti-American.
If you don't want mentally ill people to have guns,
but
you're on slippery slope.
But if it's the assessment of a friend or family member or someone who would want to weaponize it that goes to the authorities and say, I don't think they're right.
That's why you have a judge. That's why you have a court system. And while their rights may be a bridge through this process,
I just keep hearing
they
FISA,
get the court.
FISA, that worked out
that's
well.
because the Republicans need FISA was manipulated by the Democrats. I'm sorry, it was the Republicans that manipulated
Democrats did when George Bush was president. It's kind of weird.
Oh my.
You cannot be against these
We're devolving into something else.
The
FISA fight continues during the commercial. But
I think he's crazy over it. He needs to have his gun rights.
He brought up FISA.
That one's going to be pay-per-view. Okay, thank you all. Great to see you all tonight.
Thank you.
Well, coming up, a shroud of secrecy. Republicans claim the Russia probe is doing exactly what they worried it would. It's in secret. It's not accomplishing the goal of figuring out what happened in the 2016 election with plenty of transparency so the American public can know, regardless of what the outcome is. We're going to look into those claims right after this. Special counsel Robert Mueller facing new criticism from Republicans tonight over what they consider a lack of transparency. Here's Wisconsin Senator Ron Johnson.
There's completely different goals of a special counsel versus congressional oversight. I think in this case, the most important thing is public disclosure, and that is harmed when you start having special counsels and all the information is gathered and is held close.
So what you're saying is
never disclosed.
Big day tomorrow for the Mueller probe, by the way, with the first sentencing of one of the special counsel's targets. The deal reached with attorney Alex Vander Zwaan involves an agreement to keep key details of the investigation secret. Vander Zwaan was connected to former aide to President Trump, Rick Gates. That's sentencing tomorrow. Tom Dupree is a former DOJ attorney under George W. Bush. Great to have you with us.
Thanks, Shannon. Happy to be here.
Okay, a couple of things to break down there. First of all, Senator Johnson, obviously, his thought was he wanted the intelligence committees in Senate and House to finish their deals before the special counsel got involved. He's worried now that the American public isn't getting a full picture of what's going on, but it's a full-fledged investigation at this point.
Right. I think that's the key, is that right now Bob Mueller is conducting the investigation. I think once he's done, I am very confident we will see the fruits of what he found. We will either see that in the form of more indictments, or we'll see that in the form of the Ken Starr report. You'll remember back in the 90s when Ken Starr wrapped up his investigation of Whitewater and Bill Clinton and Monica Lewinsky, he turned over a many, many hundreds of page report to Congress, which then became public and put all the evidence on the table. I don't know if he'll get something that fulsome in this case, but I don't think there's any way Bob Mueller is going to keep to himself whatever it is he finds or doesn't find.
Well, interesting, because because they talked about this on the legal news blog Lawfare, and they wrote about this. They said the question of whether and how the public will learn what Mueller knows is actually complicated. Complicated legally, complicated historically, and complicated as well with respect to another variable, how Mueller imagines his role as special counsel. And they lay out several scenarios where he could go the Ken Starr route and give you everything in hundreds of pages, or just simply report to the Attorney General what he finds. Or in this case, it would be Rod Rosenstein.
Right. And I think there's going to be, needless to say, intense public interest in whatever it is Mueller finds. I think that if he reports it either to the acting Attorney General or if he reports it to Congress, at the end of the day, it is going to become public. Something like this cannot be kept under wraps. It is going to see the light of day, but I think it will see the light of day at a time and a place of Bob Mueller's choosing, which may be months in the future.
Okay, so what do you make now of this attorney? He's a Dutch attorney that's going to take, he's going to be sentenced tomorrow. He's pleaded guilty to lying to investigators, not any kind of collusion, but about conversations he knew about. He signed this plea deal in which he gives up his FOIA rights, or to his rights to go after public records. Why would that happen, and what does it mean?
Right. What that means is that Bob Mueller says that as a condition for this plea deal, I want you to give up your right to file a Freedom of Information Act request, which is a right that anyone has. The reason why Mueller is worried about it in this situation is because this guy has a lot of inside information about what Bob Mueller is investigating, and he doesn't want him to do any sort of mischief by filing public information requests that would then tip everyone else off, both subjects in the investigation and the general public, as to what it is Mueller is focused on. So I wouldn't read too much into this. This is something that you see from time to time in investigations of this nature.
Okay, so they're asking for that to be upheld. We'll see as the sentencing goes down tomorrow. Quickly, any thoughts on the word we're hearing tonight that the DOJ is telling U.S. immigration's judges they got to speed it up? I mean, there's a backlog of some 600,000 immigration cases, and they say it's not fair to those people. It's not fair to average Americans. You know, what do you do?
That's right. And I think that's something, frankly, that people across the political spectrum can agree on, is that there is a major problem in our immigration courts. These cases take far too long to decide. I think what the Attorney General is doing is just trying to make them decided a little faster. It's not dramatic. It's a slight increase in the pace. There are escape hatch provisions if a judge says that he or she can't decide this number of cases. But I think it's a good thing to do, to basically say we need justice to be served faster, whether that means denying people requests, whether that means granting requests. We just need these cases to be resolved.
Yeah, well, we'll see how that plays out as well, because I think that starts October, this new structure. Tom Dupree, always great to see you.
Great to be here, Shannon. Thank you.
All right, stick around. The Pope baptizes a hero. We'll tell you his story when we return.